The last thing Ethan Vance remembered was the scent of lavender and old paper. It was the smell of their shared apartment, a tiny, sun-drenched space where books were stacked on every surface and dried lavender hung in the kitchen. Its faint floral perfume a constant gentle promise. He remembered a specific Tuesday, just weeks before, when he'd found Amelia asleep on the sofa, blueprints for the Vance Hayes Community Arts Center fanned across her chest like a paper quilt. The crisp edges of the paper rose and fell with her gentle, rhythmic breathing. He had knelt, the old floorboards creaking, a sound as familiar as his own heartbeat, and gently moved the papers aside, tracing the faint blue lines with his finger. Our legacy, he'd thought. He brushed a kiss across her forehead, her skin warm and soft. Her eyes had fluttered open, those impossible sky-blue eyes, still misty with sleep, and she'd smiled a sleepy, perfect smile that reshaped his entire world. "It's going to be our masterpiece, E," she'd whispered, her hand finding his. "I can already see it. The main gallery will get the afternoon light, just like you designed. Our kids will have their first art classes in that east wing." He had squeezed her hand, his heart swelling with a love so vast it felt like the sky itself, a boundless, cloudless certainty. He was on his way to the final pitch for that masterpiece, for their future. He had the ring, a simple, elegant piece of brushed platinum he'd designed to echo the archways of their future building, nestled safely in his coat pocket. The cool, solid weight of it felt like the anchor of his entire world. Then the world erupted. Not in a single blast, but in a horrific, drawn-out symphony of destruction. The demonic screech of tires tearing at the asphalt, the violent percussive crunch of metal that vibrated through his bones. A sickening, grinding impact that felt like the planet itself had cracked open. He remembered a flash of Amelia's face behind his eyes, a silent scream, before the crystalline explosion of the windshield filled the air with glittering, deadly dust. And then silence, a profound, endless, suffocating dark. For 3 years, that darkness was his universe. A silent, featureless void where dreams and memories bled together into a meaningless, churning haze. It wasn't sleep. It was a non-existence, a purgatory where he was a ghost in his own mind. It was a place of echoes and whispers, fragments of conversations, the ghost of Amelia's laugh, all untethered from time and reality. He was adrift in a cold, starless sea, his identity slowly dissolving like salt in water. And then, on a stark, sun-drenched Tuesday in June of 2025, a new scent pierced the gloom, the harsh, sterile sting of antiseptic, so sharp it felt like an assault. Ethan's eyes fluttered open to a brutal, unforgiving weight. The world returned to him in agonizing, out-of-focus fragments. His body was a foreign land, a cage of deadened nerves and atrophied muscle that refused his command. A breathing tube snaked down his throat, a suffocating violation. He tried to call out, to scream, but his throat was a desert, his tongue a leaden weight. A frantic, primal terror clawed at him, the horror of being a ghost in his own flesh, a sentient mind trapped in a broken, unresponsive vessel. He was buried alive inside himself. The steady, rhythmic beeping of a machine next to him was a maddening metronome counting out the seconds of his imprisonment. But through the rising tide of panic, one thought, one name, fought its way through the fog like a prayer. Amelia. Her face, the memory of her smile, the promise in her sky-blue eyes. She was his lighthouse. She was his proof that he was real. She would guide him home. A nurse, her movements brisk and efficient, noticed his stirring. "Mr. Vance, can you hear me?" she asked, her voice a blend of professional calm and genuine surprise. Ethan's own voice was a stranger, a dry, rasping whisper, a sound torn from a throat he didn't recognize. "Amelia?" "We've contacted your next of kin," the nurse said, her smile a little too tight, a little too practiced. "They'll be here soon." His next of kin, Amelia, and, of course, David. David Chen, more than a best friend. David was the brother Ethan had chosen, the third pillar of their inseparable trinity. Since their college days, it had been Ethan Vance and Amelia Hayes, the soulmates, and David, their fiercely loyal champion, the one who'd helped them move into that first tiny apartment. The thought of them, of their faces, was the only anchor in this disorienting sea. The hours that followed were a grueling ordeal of tests and questions he couldn't properly answer. But even the excruciating physical pain was but a dull echo compared to the frantic, tightening knot of anxiety in his chest. A cold dread began to pool in his stomach, a certainty that something was deeply wrong. Every time the door opened, his heart leaped with a painful, desperate hope, only to crash when it was just another nurse or doctor. Where were they? When they finally walked through the door, the relief Ethan had craved was instantly suffocated by a chilling premonition. They came together. Amelia was there, as breathtakingly beautiful as his last memory of her, but it was like looking at a perfect statue of the woman he loved, cold and distant. A guardedness clouded her features, a mask of strained pity where unrestrained joy should have been. When she reached for his hand, her touch was hesitant, her fingers cold, a ghost of its former warmth that felt like a betrayal in itself. And beside her stood David, his hand resting on the small of her back, a gesture of casual intimacy so possessive, so proprietary, that it sent a shard of ice splintering through Ethan's heart. "Ethan, my God," Amelia whispered. Her voice was thick, but not with the pure, unadulterated joy he had fantasized about for 3 years. It was a tangled knot of guilt and something else, annoyance. As if his awakening was a problem she now had to solve. "It's a miracle," David added, his usually confident baritone strained. He couldn't meet Ethan's eyes, his gaze fixed on a point on the wall just over Ethan's shoulder. We never gave up hope." The lie hung in the air, thick and suffocating. It was a poorly constructed, hastily erected wall between them, and Ethan could see every crack. In the days that followed, the reality of his new world began to seep into the cracks of his shattered consciousness, a slow, corrosive poison. Their visits were brief, meticulously timed. They never came alone, always together, a united front against the ghost at the feast. Their conversations stilted and full of platitudes about recovery and time. The final, soul-crushing blow wasn't delivered by them. It came from the glossy, indifferent pages of a society magazine left on his bedside table by a well-meaning hospital volunteer. He picked it up with a trembling hand, boredom his only companion. And there, under the headline, Art curator Amelia Hayes and financier David Chen announced summer wedding, was a photograph of the two of them. They were radiant, laughing on a sailboat, the very picture of carefree love. A large, ostentatious diamond, a stranger to him, glittered on Amelia's left hand. The hand he was supposed to claim, the hand that had held his as he bled on the asphalt. The magazine slipped from his nerveless fingers. A wave of nausea and vertigo washed over him, so violent he thought he might pass out. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was the utter negation of his existence. It was the realization that while he was lost in the dark, they had been dancing in the sun, building a new life on the foundations of his presumed death. The hospital room faded to gray, the sounds muffled by a roar in his ears. He read the article again, and then a third time, the cheerful, celebratory words twisting into cruelties. His world had shrunk to that single, cruel photograph. His awakening wasn't a miracle. It was a messy complication. He hadn't just been unconscious. He had been an obstacle they had finally, painstakingly, cleared from their path. A fire ignited within him, a raging inferno of betrayal that scorched the landscape of his grief and cauterized the wound into pure, unadulterated rage. His recovery was no longer a goal. It was a crusade. Pain became his fuel. His physical therapist, Izzy Rossi, saw it all. One afternoon, as he fought to take a single, agonizing step between parallel bars, his leg collapsed. He didn't just fall, he crumpled, sobs tearing from his chest, ugly, broken sounds of a man utterly destroyed. I can't even stand, he choked out, slamming a fist against the useless muscle of his thigh. They're dancing on my grave and I can't even stand. Izzy knelt beside him, her usual sharp wit softened by a deep compassion. Then we'll teach you to stand, she said, her voice a firm, steady anchor. And then we'll teach you to walk. And then you can go and do whatever the hell you need to do. From that moment, she became his silent co-conspirator. It was Izzy who unearthed their ultimate betrayal, the transfer order to a long-term care facility called Whispering Pines, a place where people were sent to be forgotten. They're not just moving on, Ethan, she told him, her voice low and urgent, her eyes blazing. They're actively trying to erase you. The final horrifying piece of the puzzle clicked into place, the hushed phone calls, the legal documents Amelia had once shoved into her purse. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a cold, calculated execution of his memory. Revenge, hot and righteous, gave him a singular purpose. With Izzy's help, he escaped. For 2 weeks, he was a ghost in his own city, building a case against them with the meticulous precision of an architect. He found the emails, the secret vacations that started mere months after his accident. He found the bank statements showing how David had systematically siphoned funds from his portfolio, masking theft as management. The wedding was to be the social event of the season, a lavish affair at the city's botanical gardens, the perfect stage. Ethan's arrival was not that of a specter, but of a man forged anew in the crucible of betrayal. He walked with the aid of a simple wooden cane, a testament to his arduous journey back from the abyss. He waited until the officiant uttered the words, "If anyone has cause why these two should not be joined together, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." From the back of the lawn, his voice, now strong and resonant, cut through the serene atmosphere. "I do." A collective gasp rippled through the guests. Amelia's face drained of all color. David stared, his mouth agape, as if seeing a ghost. Ethan began to walk forward, the rhythmic tap, tap, tap of his cane a slow, deliberate drumbeat of judgment. 3 years ago, he began, his voice calm, yet carrying to every corner of the garden, I had a ring in my pocket for this woman. I was on my way to secure the funding for a dream we built together. He paused, his eyes locking with Amelia's. I'm sure you remember Amelia, the Fiance Center, the place where our children were supposed to have art classes. He then turned his gaze to David, and you, my best man, my brother. Remember that night in our first apartment when the pipes burst and we bailed water until dawn? You swore you'd always have my back. I suppose, in a way, you were standing where you belong, just behind her. He didn't just present evidence, he told the story. He spoke of waking up alone and terrified. He spoke of their cold touches and hollow words. Then the large screen flickered to life. Emails, bank statements, and finally, the signed transfer order to Whispering Pines. The crowd murmured, the sound growing from disbelief to outrage. Amelia's father, a man who had once embraced Ethan as a son, looked upon his daughter with an expression of utter revulsion. David's business partners began to subtly distance themselves. The life they had so carefully, so ruthlessly constructed, crumbled into dust. In the ensuing pandemonium, Ethan's eyes met Amelia's one last time. He saw no remorse, no flicker of the love he had cherished. He saw only the terrified, selfish heart of a woman who had chosen a comfortable lie over the inconvenient truth of loyalty. He turned and walked away. A year later, at the grand opening of the Fiance Center, he stood in the soaring glass atrium, a monument to the dream he had refused to let die. Izzy was by his side, now a close friend. You did it, Ethan, she said softly. You built your masterpiece. I built a building, he replied, his voice devoid of triumph. He had won. He had laid their deceit bare and taken back his life. But victory was a hollow, echoing thing. As the crowd applauded, a woman walked past, and for a fleeting moment, her perfume carried a faint note of lavender. The scent hit him like a physical blow, transporting him back to a sun-drenched sofa and a sleepy, perfect smile. It was then that the victory felt most like a defeat, a monument to everything he had lost. The scars, the ones etched not on his body, but on his soul, ached with the memory of a love he once thought would last forever, a permanent reminder of its devastating, unbearable cost.